Okay guys, today we're going to have a look at the UK Marine Corps deck. I made this deck yesterday, tried some skirmishes with it, and it really performs very well. In the categories I have Logistics, Rover CP as my command vehicle. Since we're using a dedicated British deck, we get a little more accessibility to these units, a little more availability. So that means we get 7 units at a price of 110. Which is decent because they have a good road speed, good off-road speed of 95 km per hour and a good autonomy. I chose not to go with the command infantry because for one card you only get 4 of these guys, which is a little light depending on the map you're using. And I find that the Lynx A1 CP, even though you get 5, are pretty difficult to hide. You cannot put these things in forests like you can with the Rover CP, so that's why I went with this thing. Next, I take 12 stalwarts to resupply my infantry when they're fighting in towns. These are probably the safest bet, and the other option you have is the Chinook, which is much more likely to get shot down. I use these things in tandem. The Chinook stays on the outskirts of town and resupplies the stalwarts, which then go into the town. Furthermore, I have 2 FOBs, which is a bit of a weird choice maybe, but I had a few points to spare, so I decided to bring another FOB, considering I'm pretty relying on ATGMs in this deck, both airborne and on vehicles, and I want to resupply my infantry very well. You could, if you want to, switch out one of these FOBs and bring a second set of Chinooks, or a second set of stalwarts, depending on the kind of map you're facing and the kind of terrain you have. Next, in the infantry section, I have 2 squads of Marines, Royal Marines 90. These are the elite guys, you can only take these at elite. These are actually commandos, but I use them as line infantry. Reason for this is that the only other possible line infantry you have is the Ghurkas. Now these guys are almost as good as the Royal Marines, and their availability is pretty much the same, but the difference is that the Royal Marines come at an elite level, which means they do more damage, and that they are less likely to panic as much as the Ghurkas are. They also have a bit more range on their assault rifle versus the submachine gun from the Ghurkas, but furthermore they carry the same weaponry. So basically you could be using Ghurkas for the role of the Royal Marines, but since you have the points, you have the availability, why not? Then I'm using 10 SAS squads in a Puma 1HC or HC1. These guys are my commandos which go behind enemy lines, shoot down planes with their stingers, probably if you can get them next to a capture zone. Preferably the enemy spawn, because that's where the planes are coming from, and these things can really wreck your day if they get behind the lines. The AT-4 can be used to go hunting for artillery, go hunting for anti-air units, and the machine gun or the M16 could be used against infantry, but hopefully you won't run into too many of those. I bring them with the Puma HC1 because this chopper has the best availability. You could bring them in the AH7, but that leaves you with 7 squads, and the AH1 is also an option. Next I got 8 Milans 2 in a Saxon. If you want to, you could airlift these guys also with the AH1, but since they're mostly going to be fighting in towns, I chose to bring them in a Saxon because those things are less likely to be shot down. They're a little less vulnerable. They have a good range, 2450, decent accuracy, although I would want them to be at 50%, and an AP power of 24. You could, if you want to, bring these at hardened, that gives you 12 units, but I found that veteran works a little better because they get a little accuracy buff. Next, the anti-air units are the stalwarts. These units are the javelins, which are the dedicated anti-air units. Use these to shoot down helicopters. You can shoot down planes if you wish to, but the range is only 1960, which is not very good. If you want to use something to shoot down a plane, go for the Stormer HVM, which we're going to see in the support tab. I use 7 of these, which is also the veteran level, and they come in a stalwart, so they can push up with the main force, go there at 150 kph on the road or 90 kilometers off-road. And then I use the Ghurkas 90s. These are the guys with very good anti-tank weapons, decent submachine guns and a good machine gun. I use these in both the Lynx AH-1 for rapid deployment or the stalwarts if they want to go into towns. I also have the same setup, or I could use the same setup with the Royal Marines. Currently these both come in Saxons, but the Royal Marines have a lot of different transport options, and maybe it's better to bring one squad of these guys in by Lynx. Next is the support tab. I use the Stormer HVM, which has good range against pretty much anything. You can use these to attack anything, since they can fire at ground, helicopters and airplanes. Ground is pretty good range. You can use them as makeshift TDs if you want to. And their AP power of 12 is going to at least worry some of the tanks they're going to be fighting. But the best use of these things is against helicopters with their good range against them. For fighting helicopters on the cheaper, I have the tracked Rapiers. These have a range of 2800 meters, come with 8 missiles, their accuracy is 50%. The one thing about these things is that they're very bad at off-road driving, which is a bit weird for a tracked vehicle. They only go 35, so make sure that you keep these near the road so you can relocate them pretty quickly. The sister version of these are the tracked Rapiers FSAs. These are the plane killers, with a range of 3 kilometers against the plane, versus the 2200 meters from the tracked Rapier. Since the vehicle is the same, these have the same problem of off-road speed, which is only 35, but on-road speed is 110, so keep these things near the roads, fire a couple shots at a plane, relocate them so you don't get RD'd. Lastly, in the support tab I bring the M433 Abbott, which is the artillery, and is the only artillery you can bring. It's always good to have some artillery in your deck, and since the accuracy of these things is pretty bad, I've decided to bring 7 of them so I can use them in 3 or 4 unit squads, which give me the best chance of actually hitting something. Keep in mind that their range is 17.5 kilometers, so that means you're not going to be able to shoot all the way across the map on some of the bigger maps. In the tanks we get only one option, which is the Scorpion light tank. I've never really found a use for these, but I bring them because I want to have the ability to bring in a vehicle that can deal with light vehicles. Certainly don't use these things against tanks, because they have only an AP power of 10 and about 0 frontal armor. Even autocannons can wreck these things. But they're pretty cheap, so you can spread them around your flanks if you wish to. Recon, I have 2 squads of the SBS, Special Boat Service. These guys have very good optics, very small and very good stealth, so make sure that you use these guys to scout. I found that these work very well in combination with the SAS, and since both the SAS and the SBS are coming in the Lynx AH-1, I can rapidly deploy a couple of commando/raid squads behind enemy lines, go hunting for stuff, have the SBS spot them and the SAS destroy them. Next I'm bringing Gazelle AH-1. These are exceptional optics choppers for only 65 points at an incredible speed of 310. I had a couple points left, so I brought 2 squads of these at the at the trained veterancy, which is the highest you can get. And then for ground surveillance I have the FV-107 Scimitar, which has good optics, small size, good off-road speed and a very good autocannon. Next, in the vehicle tab I bring the Striker ATGM launcher. Again, not that great of an accuracy at only 45%, but a very good AP power of 22, and they bring 10 missiles. Keep in mind that these things don't have a stabilizer, so they need to be still when they're launching and they need to maintain line of sight. Frontal armor is not very good, so make sure that when a tank gets in range you pull these guys out, put them on reverse move and pull them back into forests or other hiding spots you found. Since this deck is mostly focused on town fighting, I brought 20 Centurion AVREs at the hardened veterancy level. I chose hardened because these guys are going to be taking a lot of fire, and the more veterancy they have, the less likely they are to panic. So this way you have a couple of heavy tanks which do a lot of HE damage and can soak up a lot of damage with their 12 frontal armor for only 40 points. I've seen these guys earn their value by 3 or 4 times per tank. So it's very handy to have a couple of these in their initial push to take a town. They can deal with any infantry, stun any vehicles, stun heavy tanks, but they're only 40 apiece, so they're well worth it. The helicopter tab, I have 30 helicopters, which is a high amount of choppers. I have 20 Lynx AH-1 tows. This gives me a total of 160 tow missiles, tow 1 version. They have a good accuracy, 50%, a good AP power of 15, and I decided to go with flying ATGMs instead of ground ATGMs because the aerial version are usually better capable of hitting stuff. They're not that expensive, and with my 2 FOBs I can resupply these things if I want to. I have 20 of these, but you could opt for 17 in the form of 1 trained and 1 hardened, or 2 hardened, which gives you 14 choppers, which is still more than enough. For the heavier opposition I got the Lynx AH-TOW 2. Same missile, but the upgraded version of it, so better accuracy and better AP power. High speed, which means that they can get to the side of a tank or get to the front line where you need them very quickly. So you can use these as a response force in case something heavy shows up. Next is the aerial tab. You don't really get a lot of selection of planes for the United States Marines. Sorry, the United Kingdom Marines. So what I decided to bring here is the Harrier GR7. Since the patch, these things lost their ATGMs and instead gained the Paveway laser guided HE bomb. These are very good bombs, will not immediately take out a tank in one go. It really depends on the tank, but they hit them on the top side, which does a lot of damage to most vehicles. Keep in mind that this thing drops 4 bombs with a dispersion of 0, which means that something you drop these bombs on is going to get hit 4 times by a bomb. They're not carpet bombers, so keep that in mind when you're using these things. Since we have enough points in this deck and not that many options for planes, I decided to bring 2 cards of these at the trained level. I don't really see any advantage to having them at elite because they're not doing a lot of fighting, they're just delivering bombs. And since they already have a dispersion of 0, it's not going to get much better than this. So numbers are better. Next is the Sea Harrier FA2. These are the seed planes. Some good seed missiles at 5 km range, 70% accuracy, 22 AP power. I sent these out along with the Harrier GR7. Together they can destroy anti-air, which allows the GR7 to do their job much safer. Next is the Sea Harrier FRS-1. These are basically the only designated air superiority fighters that the British get in the Marine deck. They get 4 AIM-9L missiles, which is very good for taking out helicopters with an accuracy of 50%, but not so good for taking out planes because they only have a 3,500 meter range. And at a speed of 750 and an ECM of 10, they're going to lose to pretty much any plane. So make sure you only use these against helicopters. Lastly in my deck is the Harrier GR3, and these guys come equipped with the 68mm rockets. Now I was a bit hesitant to use these, but once I tested them out I found them to be very effective at taking out infantry and light vehicles. And since they rearm very quickly, you can use them pretty much all the time. If you have 2 of these available in your airplane, in your airfield, you can pretty much always fly a sortie with these whenever you need them. And at 750 they're going to be coming in pretty quickly. Now as for the naval section, I decided to build the naval section around quickly establishing a beachhead so team members or even myself can set up a forward capture zone, hopefully with a spawn point, so that I can bring in more of the units I have in the other tabs. For this purpose I brought 2 Lafayettes. These have a very good suppression capability for anything that's near the coast. They have a range of almost 5 clicks with their main gun, which means that they can really reach out inland and touch tanks, vehicles, ATGMs, anti-air, whatever you like. And combined with their Quotal CN2 missiles, they can take out helicopters and airplanes with a very high efficiency due to their 80% accuracy. Now, to fill my gap in the air category, I have two F-14 Tomcats. With their 12-kilometer anti-air missile, I use these as an air patrol over my main base. So not over the front lines, but over the main base. Because this is how you can have a long-range air-to-air capability without risking the actual Tomcat itself. Next, a couple of LCUs to resupply the Lafayettes and possibly any of the units I'm going to land on the shores. The monitors I use because of their M49, which is a howitzer with very good accuracy, little range of 17 kilometers, which is not as good as most artillery, but it will still get the job done, especially if you have them close to the shore. These have a decent rate of fire of 6. I'm using 4 of these at elite, but you could even go with 8 of them and use them in squads of 3 or 4 as heavy artillery batteries to support whatever units you have close to the shore or even further inland. For the actual landing force, I have 4 special boat service units. I decided to bring these at veteran because the chances of these guys dying in the initial push are pretty good. So bringing 3 of them at elite really reduces the number by 25%, and the more the merrier in this case. They're going to be backed up by Royal Marine 90s. You could fly in a couple of Royal Marines or Ghurkas from your infantry tab with the helicopters if you want to. And you can resupply these guys using the LCUs. These are the same Royal Marines we saw earlier in the infantry deck. Next, the Striker to provide some ATGM capability. If you establish a beachhead, it's probable that you're going to encounter tanks which are going to push back. Make sure that you have a couple of these things to really force them out or to keep them at bay so that the main landing force can come in. And use them in tandem with the Lafayettes to provide anti-air capability. Lastly, I have 3 HQ sections coming in as Saxon. These guys are the last to come in to any landing zone, and these guys can be used to capture the zone so that newer forces can come in. Now, one of the weaknesses of this deck is anti-air capability. They don't really have a long range anti-air. We got the tractor Piers, we got the Stormer, but the one thing that's missing is a Spog. A Jeopard or something like it would be very nice, but unfortunately the Marines don't get this. So make do with what you have, and against helicopters use the Sea Harrier FRS-1. So this is my deck at the moment. I hope you like it. I'll leave the insertion code for you behind in the description so you can upload or so you can download the deck yourself. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'd love to hear what you think about this deck. Okay, thank you for watching. Cheers.